You know that business meeting? I am heading there now.
Her billionaire husband said he was at a business meeting. She saw him at the airport with her sister and a baby. Hi, my beautiful story family. Welcome home to Mr. James Stories. Before we begin, I have a small confession to make, and it sits a little heavy on my heart. When I told my own mother I wanted to start this channel to share these stories of justice, she looked at me with sad eyes and said, "James, give it up. Nobody listens to stories anymore. You won't even reach 1,000 subscribers." It hurt to hear that from her, but I believe she is wrong. I believe in us. I believe there are still people here who love truth and justice. So, I am asking you a personal favor. If you want to help me prove her wrong and show that this family is strong and real, please press that subscribe button right now. Let's show her that we are here and we are listening. Now, get ready. The story you are about to hear is the definition of poetic justice. It is a masterclass in how a quiet woman can bring a loud giant to his knees without ever raising her voice. He thought he could leave her with $50 and erase her existence. He didn't know that she held the password to his entire life. Let's calm our spirits. Today, I bow my heart for the woman listening who feels invisible. I send this wish out to the universe for the wife who is the engine behind the success, yet receives none of the glory. I ask for strength for the soul that has been told she is too boring, too quiet, or not enough, while she quietly holds the entire world together. May you be reminded today that silence is not weakness. It is often where the greatest power resides. May you feel the peace of knowing your vindication is already written. If you are ready to reclaim your worth, write, "I am valuable" in the comments. Let's begin. The penthouse smelled of ozone and expensive cologne, a sharp, metallic mix that always made Audrey feel like an intruder in her own home. Audrey sat at the marble kitchen island, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. To the untrained eye, she looked like a bored housewife scrolling through recipes or shopping for shoes. But on the screen, lines of complex Python code cascaded like a digital waterfall. She was running a diagnostic on the Sentinel, the high-frequency trading algorithm that had earned her husband, Preston, exactly $14 million while they slept last night. She adjusted a variable in the risk assessment module, her mind moving faster than her fingers. There was a tiny inefficiency in the Asian market routing. If she patched it, she could increase their yield by 0.4%. That was another $2 million a week. "Audrey, have you seen my onyx cufflinks? The ones with the diamond inlay." Preston's voice boomed from the master bedroom, shattering her concentration. Audrey quickly minimized the code window, replacing it with a generic news site. Preston didn't like it when she looked at the back end of the business. He said it ruined the magic if people knew his financial genius was actually just her mathematical models. "Check the velvet box on the dresser," she called back, her voice soft and steady. "Second drawer, behind the Patek Philippe case." Preston emerged a moment later, a whirlwind of nervous energy and bespoke Italian wool. He was a handsome man, in the way a shark is handsome, sleek, predatory, and constantly moving. He adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of the sub-zero fridge, preening. "Davos," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "The World Economic Forum. This is it, Audrey. Once I accept the Visionary of the Year award, the European markets will open up. We're talking billions. I'll be on the cover of Time." Finally, he walked over to the island, not to kiss her, but to grab his double espresso. He took a sip and grimaced. "Too bitter. You need to recalibrate the machine. It's the same setting you've used for 3 years, Preston," she said gently. "Well, fix it," he snapped, setting the cup down with a clatter that made Audrey flinch. He looked at her then, really looked at her, his eyes scanning her simple gray sweater and messy bun with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "God, look at you. You're practically blending into the drywall. You know, there will be wives at this summit, trophy wives, politicians, actresses, women who make an effort." Audrey looked down at her hands. They were clean, unmanicured, functional hands. "I thought you said this was strictly business. That's why I'm not coming." "You're not coming because you'd be eaten alive," Preston laughed, a cruel, barking sound. He checked his phone. "Can you imagine? You, trying to make small talk with the CEO of Goldman Sachs? You'd probably start talking about whatever it is you do all day. Knitting, gardening." Audrey felt the familiar sting, old and dull, like a bruise that never quite healed. She didn't knit. She didn't garden. She built mathematical models that predicted market crashes before they happened. She was the reason he was the visionary of the year. But Preston had convinced her long ago that her skills were merely technical support, not leadership. He was the face, she was just the shadow. "I need to go," he said, checking his heavy gold watch. "The jet is fueled. I'll be gone 5 days." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin piece of plastic. He tossed it onto the marble counter. It slid across the smooth surface and stopped right next to her hand. It was a prepaid debit card. A generic, drugstore brand with a bright green logo. "I've frozen the main accounts," Preston said casually, grabbing his briefcase. "Security protocol. With all the high-profile figures at Davos, hackers are going to be swarming. I can't risk our liquidity. I've put a lock on everything until I return." Audrey stared at the card. A cold knot formed in her stomach. "Preston, the house staff? The grocery delivery? The bills? Canceled them," he said, already walking toward the private elevator. "You don't need a chef for one person, Audrey." And honestly, he paused at the brass doors, looking back at her with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "There's $50 on that card. Try to make it last. If you skip a few meals, it might actually do you some good. You've been looking a little soft lately." The elevator doors chimed and slid open. He stepped inside, adjusting his cuffs. "Don't wait up," he said. And then he was gone. The silence rushed back in, heavy and cold. Audrey sat frozen, the insult vibrating in the air. Soft. He called the woman who built his empire soft. She looked at the cheap plastic card. $50. He made $14 million last night, and he left her with $50 and a complex about her weight. She stood up, her legs feeling shaky, and walked over to where he had been standing. She needed to clear the counter. She needed to wipe away the ring of espresso he had left, erasing him from the room just as he had erased her from his life. But as she reached for a cloth, her eye caught something glimmering under the under-cabinet lighting. It was a small, silver device, about the size of a thumb drive. Audrey's breath hitched. She picked it up. It was heavy for its size. The lucky key. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a biometric RSA token, the hardware authentication key for the offshore accounts in Switzerland. Without this physical token, Preston couldn't access the vault funds to pay the entry fees for the summit. He couldn't even check into the specific high-security hotel suite he had booked. He had forgotten it. In his arrogance, in his rush to insult her and leave, he had left the literal key to his success on the kitchen counter. "He can't sign in," she whispered. If he arrived in Davos without this, he would be humiliated. He would look like an amateur. He would be locked out of his own billions. For a second, a dark thought crossed her mind. Let him fail. Let him stand at the reception desk and realize he is powerless. But the habit of saving him was too deep. It was a muscle memory honed over 7 years of marriage. If he failed, the firm failed. If the firm failed, the Sentinel, her life's work, would be exposed to scrutiny. She couldn't let that happen. Not yet. She grabbed the key. She grabbed her coat, a simple wool trench that was 5 years old. "I can catch him," she told the empty room. "If I take the service tunnel to the airfield, I can catch him before wheels up." She ran to the elevator, her heart pounding against her ribs. She told herself she was rushing because she was a good wife. She told herself she was rushing to save his reputation. She didn't know yet that she was rushing toward the moment that would kill the woman she used to be. She didn't know that the soft wife was about to die on a rainy tarmac, and something much harder, much colder, was about to be born in her place. The elevator plummeted toward the garage, carrying Audrey down into the dark. The penthouse was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Before, it had been the quiet of a museum. Cold, pristine, waiting for the owner to return. Now it felt like a tomb. Audrey walked through the front door, shivering. Her clothes were heavy with rain and oil, sticking to her skin like a second, shameful layer. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't want to see the wedding photos on the mantle. She didn't want to see the life she had spent 7 years polishing until it shone, only to find out it was rotten underneath. She walked straight to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking, partly from the cold, partly from the shock, but mostly from a sudden, gnawing hunger. She hadn't eaten since breakfast yesterday. Preston had made a comment about her waistline. "You're carrying a little extra baggage, aren't you?" And she had pushed her plate away. Soft. The word echoed in her mind. She opened the refrigerator. It was empty, save for a few bottles of sparkling water and Preston's protein shakes. The house staff usually stocked the groceries on Tuesdays. Today was Tuesday, but the shelves were bare. Cancelled, she whispered. He hadn't just left. He had erased the infrastructure of her life. She pulled out her phone and opened a food delivery app. She added a large pizza and a soda to her cart. Comfort food she hadn't allowed herself in years. Her thumb hovered over the place order button. Processing. A red banner flashed across the top of the screen. Payment declined. Please contact your bank. Audrey stared at the screen. She tried again. Declined. She pulled the cheap plastic debit card out of her pocket, the one Preston had tossed at her like a scrap to a dog. She opened the banking app for the card. Balance. $50 status. Frozen. Security hold. Wait. Why was it declining? The pizza was only $28. She clicked on the transaction history. There was a hold on the card. A security freeze initiated 15 minutes ago. Preston. He was on the jet. He must have realized she wasn't at the house when he checked the security cameras remotely. Or maybe he just wanted to be sure. He had remotely locked even the pittance he had given her. He wants me to starve, she realized, the horror finally sinking in. He wants me to beg. A surge of adrenaline, hot and sharp, cut through her numbness. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a liability he was trying to neutralize. She ran to the library, to the hidden panel behind the mahogany bookshelf that led to her server room. This was the one place Preston never entered. He called it the Nerd Cave. To Audrey, it was the brain of the entire operation. She sat in her ergonomic chair, the blue light of 3 monitors illuminating her pale face. Her fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. If he wanted a war, he was going to get one. Run historical trace, she commanded. Search parameters, Jessica. Travel logs. Expense reports. The algorithm, her algorithm, churned through the data. Photos, receipts, flight manifests began to populate the screen. October 2023, Ritz-Carlton, Paris. 2 guests. December 2024, private villa, Maldives. 3 guests, 1 infant. The timeline scrolled back, further and further. Audrey's eyes widened. August 14th, 2022. She froze. August 14th. That was the day of her miscarriage. She had been in the hospital, alone, because Preston said he had a crisis board meeting in Chicago. The screen showed a credit card charge from that day. The Peninsula Hotel, Chicago. Room service, champagne and strawberries. He hadn't been at a board meeting. He was celebrating. While she was losing their child, he was conceiving another one with her sister. A guttural sound ripped from Audrey's throat, half sob, half scream. She grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy glass paperweight, and hurled it across the room. It smashed into the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster. "You monster," she sobbed, clutching her stomach. "You absolute monster." Beep, beep, beep. A red alert window popped up on her center monitor, drowning out her grief. Intruder alert. Remote access attempt detected. Source IP. Gulfstream G650 onboard Wi-Fi. Audrey stopped crying instantly. She leaned in. Someone on the jet was trying to log into the Sentinel. It wasn't Preston. He didn't know the command lines. It was a clumsy attempt, using a brute force password guesser. Jessica, the executive assistant, was trying to lock Audrey out of her own system while they were in the air. They wanted to make sure that by the time they landed in Davos, Audrey would have zero control over the company. Audrey stared at the blinking cursor. They thought she was weak. They thought she was crying in the dark. She wiped her eyes. She cracked her knuckles. "Access denied," she whispered. She didn't block them. That would tip them off. Instead, she typed a new line of code. She created a sandbox, a fake version of the system. She would let Jessica think she had logged in. She would let them see fake numbers, fake profits, fake control. "Enjoy the simulation," Audrey hissed, hitting the enter key. But as the system stabilized, the power in the penthouse suddenly died. The screens went black. The hum of the servers cut out. Darkness swallowed her whole. Preston hadn't just frozen the cards. He had remotely cut the electricity to the penthouse. Audrey sat in the pitch black, the silence ringing in her ears. No money, no food, no power. And outside, the storm was raging. She grabbed her laptop and the lucky key. She couldn't stay here. If she stayed here, she would die of cold or despair. She needed Wi-Fi, and she needed an ally. The Starbucks on Fifth Avenue was a beacon of warmth in the gray city, smelling of roasted beans and wet raincoats. Audrey sat in the corner, hunched over her laptop. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was still damp, plastered to her skull. Her gray sweater was stained with oil from the airfield. She was shivering uncontrollably, despite the heat of the shop. Around her, people were chatting, working, living their normal lives. None of them knew that the woman in the corner had just lost her husband, her sister, and her dignity in the span of 3 hours. "One small black coffee," a barista called out. Audrey walked up to the counter, keeping her head down. She pulled out the $50 debit card again. Maybe the freeze was only on large purchases. Maybe she could just get something hot to hold. She tapped the card. Beep. Declined. The barista, a teenager with purple hair, sighed loudly. "Ma'am, it's declined. Do you have another card?" I think there's a mistake," Audrey stammered, her face burning. "Can you try it one more time?" "It's $3.50, the barista said, rolling her eyes. "If you can't pay, you have to leave. This isn't a shelter." Tears pricked Audrey's eyes. The humiliation was total. The wife of a billionaire, kicked out of a coffee shop for $3. "I'll get it." A voice, deep and smooth like aged whiskey, came from behind her. Audrey turned. A man was standing there. He was tall, wearing a charcoal trench coat that looked lived in but expensive. He had silvering hair and eyes that were too sharp, too observant. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a detective. He tapped a black metal card on the reader. Beep. Approved. "Make it a venti," the stranger said. "And add a croissant. She looks like she hasn't eaten." He handed the coffee to Audrey. She took it, the warmth seeping into her frozen fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. I'll pay you back." "No, you won't," the man said. "Because you have no money, Mrs. Sterling." Audrey froze. The cup almost slipped from her hand. She looked up at him, fear spiking in her chest. "Who are you? Did Preston send you?" The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Preston? God, no. If Preston knew I was within 10 feet of you, he'd have a stroke. Which, frankly, would save us both a lot of work." He gestured to a table in the back. "Sit down, Audrey. We have a lot to discuss before that jet lands in Switzerland." Audrey hesitated, then followed him. She had nothing left to lose. They sat. The man pulled a file folder out of his coat and slid it across the table. "My name is Nathaniel Vance," he said. "I used to work for the SEC. Now, I work for myself. I hunt corporate frauds. And your husband is my white whale." Audrey stared at him. "Preston isn't a fraud. He's arrogant, but the numbers are real. I know because I wrote the code." "I know you wrote the code," Nathaniel said, his voice dropping. "That's why I'm here. You're the ghost, Audrey. The Sentinel is brilliant. It's elegant. It's too good for a moron like Preston." He tapped the file. "But Preston got greedy. He isn't just using your algorithm to trade stocks. He's selling the back-end access to foreign entities. He's laundering money for the cartels through the shell companies." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. The code doesn't allow for external routing." "It does," Nathaniel said, "when someone bypasses your safety protocols using a secondary admin key. A key he gave to his mistress." Audrey opened the file. Photos. Bank transfers. Logs. There it was. Jessica. Her sister's name was on the unauthorized access logs dating back 6 months. Jessica wasn't just sleeping with him. She was helping him dismantle Audrey's life's work and sell it for parts. "He's going to Davos to close the final sale," Nathaniel said, leaning forward. "He's selling the source code to a Chinese conglomerate for $2 billion. Once the transfer is complete, the Sentinel is gone. And you'll be framed for the embezzlement. He's been setting you up for years, Audrey. That's why everything is in your name." Audrey felt sick. The lucky key in her pocket suddenly felt heavier. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I can't stop him," Nathaniel said. "I've tried. His lawyers are too good. But you," he looked at her laptop. "You are the architect. You can burn it down from the inside." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a burner phone. "The jet lands in 2 hours, Nathaniel said. "I have a team ready to seize his assets, but we need probable cause. We need the system to flag a critical error while he's trying to show it off. We need you to crash the plane, metaphorically speaking." Audrey looked at the file. Then she looked at the croissant he had bought her. The only kindness she had received in 2 days had come from a stranger who wanted to destroy her husband. She took a bite of the croissant. It tasted like ash, but it gave her strength. "I don't just want to crash it," Audrey said, her voice steady for the first time. "I want to bury him." Nathaniel smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "Then open your laptop, Mrs. Sterling. Let's go to work." The back of Nathaniel's SUV was a mobile command center. Screens mounted on the walls flickered with satellite maps and scrolling data streams. Outside, the rain drummed relentlessly on the roof, but inside, the air was electric with tension. Audrey sat next to Nathaniel, her laptop hardwired into his secure satellite uplink. Status. Nathaniel barked at the driver, a silent, hulking man named Riz. "Target is descending," Riz rumbled. "Gulfstream G650. ETA to Zurich tarmac. 18 minutes. Audrey watched the flight tracker. The little plane icon was inching closer to the Swiss border, closer to the vault, closer to the $2 billion. "Okay," Audrey said, typing rapidly. "Here's the situation. The Sentinel has a dead man switch. It requires a biometric handshake, my retina scan, or a physical RSA token every 30 days to re-authenticate. If it doesn't get it, the system assumes the creator is dead or compromised. And what happens then?" Nathaniel asked. "It executes Protocol 0, Audrey said. "It doesn't just shut down. It inverts the trading strategy. It starts selling off the portfolio at a loss to liquidate the assets and return the funds to the original investors." Nathaniel whistled low. "A suicide vest for the portfolio. I like it. But there's a problem," Audrey said, biting her lip. "He is Jessica. She's been cloning my access. If she plugs into the Davos mainframe before the switch triggers, she can override the command. She has the secondary admin rights. She can't clone a physical key," Nathaniel pointed out. "No," Audrey said. She pulled the silver RSA token from her pocket. "I have the key, but if they realize it's missing, they will try to bypass the hardware requirement using a software patch. It will take them about 10 minutes. So we have a race," Nathaniel said. "He lands. He drives to the summit. He plugs in. If he patches the system before you trigger the switch, he wins. He sells the code, gets the billions, and disappears." Audrey looked at the screen. "I can't trigger the switch remotely until the system is online. I have to wait for him to connect to the Davos secure network. I have to wait until he thinks he's safe." "That's risky," Nathaniel warned. "If you wait too long." "I know," Audrey snapped. The soft wife was gone. The architect was in charge now. Ping. A notification flashed on the big screen. Target landed. Zurich International Airport. "He's down," Riz said. Audrey's heart hammered against her ribs. She closed her eyes for a second, picturing the scene. Preston walking down the stairs, holding the baby. Jessica in her white coat, looking like a queen. They would be getting into a limousine now. They would be laughing. "Audrey," Nathaniel said softly. "Are you sure you can do this? Once you hit that button, the money is gone. Your alimony, your settlement, it all goes up in smoke. You will be broke." Audrey opened her eyes. She looked at the $50 debit card sitting on the console. "I'm already broke, Nathaniel," she said, cold as ice. "I don't want his money. I want his freedom." Ping. System connection detected. Location, Davos Congress Center. User, admin_prime, Preston. "He's plugging in," Audrey said, her fingers hovering over the enter key. "He's probably on stage right now, showing the interface to the buyers." On her screen, she could see the live logs. Preston was initiating the demo. Initializing Sentinel. Market analysis, green. Portfolio value, $4.2 billion. He was showing them the money. He was seconds away from the sale. "Now, Audrey," Nathaniel shouted. "Do it now." Audrey didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She thought of the baby. She thought of her sister. She thought of the empty fridge. She pressed enter. Command sent. Protocol 0. Biometric check. Failed. Hardware key missing. Initiating liquidation. On the screen, the numbers turned from green to red. Portfolio value, $4.2 billion, $3.8 billion, $2.1 billion. It was a free fall. "It's working," Nathaniel breathed. "He's hemorrhaging money live on stage. He's trying to stop it," Audrey said, watching the code fight back. "Jessica is trying to run the patch. Come on, come on." Suddenly, a new window popped up. A video chat request. Incoming call, Preston. He was calling her. From the stage. Don't answer it, Nathaniel said. No, Audrey said, reaching for the mouse. I want him to see me. She clicked accept. The screen filled with Preston's face. He was sweating. His tie was crooked. Behind him, she could see chaos, people shouting, graphs crashing on a giant projector screen. Audrey, Preston screamed, his voice cracking. What did you do? Fix it. The system is crashing. Fix it now. Audrey looked into the camera. She looked at the man who had owned her for 7 years. I can't fix it, Preston, she said calmly. You need the lucky key. Remember? You left it on the counter. Preston's face went pale. Audrey, listen to me. I'll give you anything. I'll give you half. Just stop the bleed. Audrey leaned into the camera. She held up the silver key. I'm afraid your subscription has expired, darling, she said. And then, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she dropped the key into Nathaniel's cup of cold coffee. Plop. Connection terminated, she whispered. She ended the call. On the screen, the portfolio hit 0. The screen on Audrey's laptop didn't show an arrest. It showed static. Connection lost, Nathaniel said, his voice tight. He cut the feed. Audrey stared at the black rectangle where her husband's terrified face had been just seconds ago. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a mix of adrenaline and a cold, creeping dread. She had expected to feel triumphant. She had expected the immediate gratification of seeing him in handcuffs, dragged away by Swiss authorities. But the silence that followed the crash was heavy. Did it work? Audrey whispered. Is he ruined? Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. He was typing furiously on his own console, his eyes darting across lines of scrolling code. The liquidation triggered. The portfolio dumped about 40% of its value before the exchange hit a circuit breaker. You cost him billions, Audrey. But what? He stopped the bleed, Nathaniel said, pointing to a graph that had flatlined. See that? Someone on the ground in Davos physically pulled the server plugs. They killed the connection hard. That means he still has control of the hardware. He didn't lose everything. Audrey felt a chill. So he still has the source code. He has the code, Nathaniel confirmed. And more importantly, he has the microphone. As if on cue, the breaking news alert on the monitor shifted. The headline CEO arrested. The one Audrey had prayed for didn't appear. Instead, the feed cut to a live press conference outside the Davos Congress Center. A sleek, polished news anchor appeared, looking grave. Breaking news. Sterling Capital has issued an emergency statement regarding the sudden market volatility. A spokesperson for Preston Sterling claims the firm has been the victim of a cyber-terrorist attack. Audrey gasped. The air left her lungs. Cyber-terrorist. The screen cut to Preston. He wasn't in handcuffs. He was standing on a podium, flanked by armed security and Jessica. He looked disheveled, tie loosened, hair slightly messy, but he didn't look defeated. He looked like a martyr. Jessica stood next to him, holding the baby. She had tears streaming down her face, playing the role of the terrified mother perfectly. My wife, Preston said to the cameras, his voice thick with fake emotion, has been struggling with severe mental health issues for years. We tried to keep it private. We tried to get her help. But today, she lashed out in the most destructive way possible. He paused, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. She hacked our system to hurt me during a critical negotiation. This isn't corporate fraud, ladies and gentlemen. This is a domestic tragedy. My wife is unwell, and she is dangerous. She has threatened my family, my staff, and now, the global markets. Audrey slapped a hand over her mouth. He's spinning it. He's making me the villain. He's good, Nathaniel muttered, though his jaw was clenched in anger. He's using the crazy ex-wife, defense before you're even an ex. He's utilizing your silence against you. Everyone knows you're reclusive. He's painting that as instability. The news anchor continued. Swiss authorities, in cooperation with the FBI, have issued an alert for Audrey Sterling for questioning regarding international cyber espionage and grand larceny. I'm a fugitive, Audrey realized, her voice trembling. I tried to stop a crime, and now I'm the criminal. Nathaniel slammed his laptop shut. We have to move. Now. Move? Where? Not to my apartment, Nathaniel said, checking the rearview mirror. If he's framing you for cyber terrorism, he'll have federal agents tracking your phone, your car, and your known associates within the hour. That coffee shop transaction? They already know where we are. Audrey looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but but the street suddenly looked menacing. Every siren in the distance sounded like it was coming for her. "I have nothing," she whispered. "No money, no home, and now no name." Nathaniel reached over and grabbed her hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "You have the truth, Audrey, and you have the architect. But right now, we need to disappear. Throw your phone out the window." "What?" "Throw it," Nathaniel commanded. "They can triangulate the signal." "Do it." Audrey looked at the phone, her last connection to her old life. To the photos of her garden, the texts from her few friends. She rolled down the window. The wet city air rushed in. She hurled the phone into a passing garbage truck. "Good," Nathaniel said, putting the SUV into gear. "Welcome to the underground, Mrs. Sterling. The war has just begun." The drive was long and silent. They left Manhattan, weaving through the labyrinth of Queens, avoiding toll booths and traffic cameras. Nathaniel drove with a paranoid precision, checking his mirrors every 30 seconds. Audrey sat in the passenger seat, numbness slowly replacing the panic. She watched the city skyline fade in the distance, the skyline her husband claimed to own. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse. "The Bronx," Nathaniel said. "I have a safe house. It's an old server farm in the basement of a repair shop. Copper-lined walls. Faraday cage. No signals get in or out. It's where I do my real work." "You have a safe house?" Audrey looked at him, really seeing him for the first time. "Who are you, Nathaniel? You said you were an accountant." "I was," he said, his eyes fixed on the road. "But when you go after men like Preston, men who launder money for cartels and sell state secrets, you learn quickly that Excel spreadsheets don't protect you from bullets. I lost my license 5 years ago because I got too close to a client who didn't want to be audited. They ruined my reputation, just like they're ruining yours." Audrey felt a pang of connection. "So we're both ghosts." "Exactly," he said. "Ghosts are dangerous because they have nothing left to lose." They pulled up to a nondescript brick building in an industrial park. The sign above the door read, "Vance Electronics Repair, closed." Nathaniel ushered her inside quickly, locking 3 deadbolts behind them. The air inside was stale and smelled of solder and dust. But as he led her down a metal staircase into the basement, the atmosphere changed. The basement was a high-tech fortress. Banks of servers hummed along the walls, their blue LEDs the only light source. A massive setup of monitors dominated the center of the room. It was messy, chaotic, and beautiful. It looked like the inside of Audrey's brain. "It's not the penthouse," Nathaniel said, tossing his coat onto a leather couch that had seen better days. "But it's safe. There's a cot in the back, a hot plate, and enough processing power to crack the Pentagon." Audrey walked over to the monitors. She ran her fingers along the edge of the desk. She felt a strange sense of calm. This was her element. "He's going to try to sell the code manually," she said, her mind already working on the next move. "If he can't use the automated system because of the crash, he'll hand over the raw source files on a hard drive. The Chinese buyers are still in Davos. They will want the asset physically. He needs a clean copy," Nathaniel agreed. "The version on the cloud server is corrupted because of your Protocol 0 command. He needs the master backup." "The master backup is in the New York office," Audrey said. "In the physical safe. It's on an encrypted drive." "He'll send Jessica," Nathaniel said. "Or he'll send mercenaries." Audrey looked at the lucky key, still clutched in her hand. "He can't open the safe without a biometric override. Or," she paused, her eyes widening. "Or what?" "Or my eyes," she whispered. "The safe requires a retina scan. If he can't use the key, he needs me." The realization hung in the air like a threat. Preston didn't just want her arrested. He needed her physically present to unlock the backup drive, so he could complete the sale and recoup his losses. The cyber-terrorism charge was just a way to flush her out so his men could grab her before the feds did. "He's going to hunt me," Audrey said. "Not to put me in jail, to put me in front of a retinal scanner." Nathaniel walked over to a wall safe and spun the dial. He pulled out a sleek, black Glock 19 and a burner laptop. "Let him hunt," Nathaniel said, checking the chamber of the gun. "We'll be waiting." He handed her the laptop. "Audrey, I need you to rewrite the encryption protocol. If they try to drill that safe, I want the drive to melt. Can you do that?" Audrey opened the laptop. The familiar glow of the screen reflected in her eyes. She cracked her knuckles. "I can do better," she said, a dark smile touching her lips for the first time. I can make the drive send a virus back to the drill. Night fell over the industrial park, heavy and starless. Inside the bunker, time seemed to blur. Audrey had been coding for 6 hours straight. She was in a trance, the flow state that Preston had always mocked as zoning out. But Nathaniel didn't mock her. He silently placed a cup of tea next to her hand and stepped away, giving her space to work. She was building a digital trap. If anyone accessed the New York mainframe, this code would trace their location, photograph their face through the webcam, and upload the data to an immutable blockchain ledger. Evidence that couldn't be deleted. You should sleep, Nathaniel said from the couch. He was cleaning his gun, the rhythmic click-clack of the slide providing a soothing background noise. I can't, Audrey said, eyes glued to the screen. I keep seeing the baby. My nephew. He looked so happy with him, Nathaniel. Like a real father. Narcissists are great actors, Nathaniel said gently. The baby is a prop to him. Just like you were. Just like Jessica is. Jessica, Audrey murmured. She's the weak link. How so? She's greedy, Audrey said. But she's not smart. Not like this. And she's insecure. If Preston is stressed, he'll take it out on her. He always punches down. As if summoned by her name, a notification popped up on the burner laptop. Incoming encrypted email. Sender. Unknown. Nathaniel. Audrey called out sharply. I have a message. Nathaniel was at her shoulder in a second. Don't open it. Could be a tracker. It's a text file, Audrey said. Low risk. Look at the subject line. The subject line read, Sissy. It's her, Audrey whispered. She clicked the file. It wasn't a plea for help. It wasn't an apology. Audrey. Preston is furious. You ruined the demo. But you didn't win. We have lawyers who cost more than your entire life's work. They are drafting the papers now. You are going to be buried under so many lawsuits you won't be able to breathe. But here is the deal. Preston is willing to show mercy. Meet us at the Gushtad safe house in 24 hours. Unlock the backup drive remotely. If you do, he drops the charges. He gives you a settlement. You can disappear. If you don't, we release the videos, Audrey. You know the ones. The ones from the bedroom. The ones he recorded without you knowing. Tick-tock. Jay? Audrey stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. He recorded us, she choked out. Intimate videos? It's blackmail, Nathaniel growled, his face darkening with a terrifying rage. It's the lowest form of leverage. He's trying to shame you into compliance. Audrey felt a wave of nausea. The violation was so deep, so personal. It wasn't just her mind he had stolen. It was her body. He had kept leverage on her from the very beginning, just in case she ever rebelled. She imagined those videos leaking. Her face, her vulnerability, broadcast to the world. This silent powerhouse reduced to a scandalous thumbnail on a gossip site. I have to do it, she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. I can't let him release those. It would kill me. No, Nathaniel said firmly. He turned her chair so she had to look at him. That is exactly what he wants. Shame is his weapon, Audrey. But if you give in now, he owns you forever. But everyone will see. Let them look, Nathaniel said fiercely. Because while they are looking at that, we are going to be looking at his bank accounts. We are going to find where he hid the cartel money. And we are going to send him to prison for life. He pointed to the screen. Don't reply, Nathaniel ordered. We need to go on the offensive. He wants the backup drive? Let's give it to him. But let's make sure it's a Trojan horse. Audrey wiped her tears. She looked at the blackmail note one last time. You're right, she said. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady as she reached for the keyboard. He wants to play dirty? I wrote the code for dirty. The bunker hummed with the sound of cooling fans. For 3 hours, the only other sound was the relentless clacking of Audrey's mechanical keyboard. She wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried into stiff tracks on her cheeks, but her eyes were burning with a terrifying focus. She was building something nasty. Explain it to me, Nathaniel said, leaning over her shoulder. It's called the Mirror Protocol, Audrey said, her voice devoid of emotion. Preston wants the source code. He thinks the backup drive in the New York safe is the Holy Grail. So, I'm going to give him access to the drive remotely. But I'm modifying the file structure. How? When they download the file, it will look real, she explained, pointing to a block of code. It will have the right file size, the right extension. But once they try to compile it, once they try to run the Sentinel, the code will invert. Invert. Instead of looking outward at the stock market, Audrey said, a grim smile touching her lips. The algorithm will look inward. It will scan their hard drive. It will scrape every email, every password, every deleted photo, and upload it to a public server before deleting itself. Nathaniel whistled. You're building a digital boomerang. He wants to shame me with private videos? Audrey said, her finger hovering over the enter key. Fine. Then I'm going to expose every dirty deal he's ever made. Let's see whose reputation breaks first. She hit execute. On the screen, a green progress bar filled up. Mirror protocol, armed. Target, New York mainframe. Now we wait, Nathaniel said. They have to physically connect to the server in New York to download the bait. They can't do it from Switzerland. He won't go himself, Audrey said. He's too cowardly. He'll send someone expendable. Jessica. Maybe, Audrey said. Or maybe he hired help. Either way, once they plug in, we own them. But as she watched the screen, a notification popped up. A live feed from the security cameras in the penthouse. Nathaniel had tapped into them an hour ago. Audrey, Nathaniel said sharply. Look. On the grainy black and white feed, the elevator doors to the penthouse were sliding open. It wasn't Jessica. It wasn't a lawyer. It was three men dressed in tactical gear. They wore balaclavas and carried heavy duffel bags. They moved with a precision that wasn't corporate security. It was military. Mercenaries, Nathaniel whispered. He didn't send lawyers. He sent a cleanup crew. Audrey watched in horror as one of the men pulled out a high-powered drill and walked toward the wall safe, the safe that held the physical drive. They aren't going to download it, Audrey realized. They're going to steal the physical unit. If they take the physical drive, the mirror protocol won't trigger, Nathaniel said, cursing under his breath. They'll take it to a clean room, strip the data offline, and we lose our leverage. Audrey looked at the screen. The man was positioning the drill over the lock. We have to stop them, she said. We can't, Nathaniel said. We're in the Bronx. They're on 5th Avenue. Police response time is 5 minutes. But if we call 911, they'll see your name on the lease and the feds will be alerted to your location. Audrey watched the drill spin up. The noise would be deafening in the empty apartment. I can't stop them from taking it, Audrey said, her mind racing. But I can make sure that when they open it, they find something else. She began typing again, faster this time. What are you doing? I'm overclocking the server fans, Audrey said. I'm bypassing the thermal throttles. Audrey, if you do that, the server rack will overheat. It'll catch fire. Exactly, she said. On the screen, the temperature gauges for the penthouse server room began to spike. 60 degrees Celsius. 80 degrees Celsius. 100 degrees Celsius. Burn it, she whispered. Burn it all. On the security feed, the mercenary with the drill paused. He tilted his head. He could hear it. A low, whining roar coming from behind the wall. The sound of fans spinning at 20,000 revolutions per minute, screaming as they tore themselves apart. Thermal runaway initiated, Audrey said, her hand shaking on the mouse. Inside the penthouse wall, the server rack was glowing cherry red. The plastic casing on the hard drives began to melt. Smoke, thick, black, and acrid, began to seep out from behind the bookshelf. The mercenary shouted something to his team. He dropped the drill and backed away. Boom. A capacitor exploded inside the server room. The blast blew the hidden door off its hinges. Flames licked out, hungry and violent, catching the heavy velvet curtains nearby. Fire detected, the automated building system announced over the speakers. Evacuate immediately. The mercenaries didn't panic. They didn't try to put it out. They simply looked at the safe, then at the fire spreading rapidly toward it. Grab the paintings, one of them shouted. Audrey could hear it through the camera microphone. They abandoned the safe. They started grabbing the expensive art off the walls, the Warhols, the Basquiats. They weren't there for data anymore. They were cutting their losses. They're leaving, Nathaniel said. You did it. You destroyed the drive. Audrey watched the flames consume the room. She watched her wedding photo on the mantelpiece curl up and turn to ash. The face of the man she loved blackened and crumbled away. It was a funeral pyre for her marriage. The drive is slag, Audrey said, leaning back in her chair. Preston can't sell the code now. He has nothing. He has the blackmail, Nathaniel reminded her gently. And now, he's going to be angrier than ever. As the fire sprinklers in the penthouse finally kicked on, drenching the room in gray water, Audrey's burner laptop pinged. Another email. Sender, Preston. No subject line. Just an attachment. He knows, Audrey said. He was watching the feed too. Don't open it, Nathaniel warned. I have to. She clicked the attachment. It was an image file. It was a screenshot. A single frame from a video. It showed Audrey, sleeping in bed, unaware she was being filmed. It was intimate. Vulnerable. Below the image was a single line of text. You like playing with fire? Fine. Let's burn together. I'm leaking the first video to the tabloids in 1 hour unless you turn yourself into the Swiss embassy. Audrey stared at the image. She felt exposed. Naked. The shame washed over her like a tidal wave. He's going to do it, she whispered. He's really going to do it. Nathaniel slammed his hand on the desk. He's bluffing. If he releases that, he admits to a federal crime. Revenge porn is a felony. He doesn't care. Audrey cried. He's in Switzerland. He's untouchable right now. And once it's on the internet, it's there forever, Nathaniel. My career, my reputation, it's over. She stood up, grabbing her coat. Where are you going? To the embassy, she said, her voice hollow. I can't let him release that video. I have to surrender. Audrey, stop. Nathaniel grabbed her arm. That is a suicide run. You go to the embassy, they extradite you to face the cyber-terrorism charges. Preston wins. He gets the settlement. He keeps the money, and you go to prison. At least I'll have my dignity, she shouted, pulling away. Dignity. Nathaniel laughed darkly. You think surrendering to a bully gives you dignity? No. It gives him satisfaction. He dragged her over to the monitor. Look at the timestamp on that screenshot, he ordered. Audrey looked through her tears. August 14th, 2022. That date. She whispered. August 14th, Nathaniel said. The day of your miscarriage. Audrey froze. He wasn't filming you because he loved you, Nathaniel said, his voice dripping with disgust. He was filming you because he was establishing an alibi. He set the camera up to prove he was home while he snuck out to meet Jessica. The realization hit Audrey like a physical blow. The video wasn't just blackmail. It was proof of his timeline, proof of his lie. If he releases that video, Audrey said slowly, the gears in her mind turning, he proves he wasn't in Chicago. He proves he falsified his corporate expense report for that trip. Exactly, Nathaniel grinned. He's holding a grenade, Audrey. But he forgot to check if the pin was still in. The clock on the wall ticked. 58 minutes left. We have to call his bluff, Nathaniel said. But we have to do it publicly. We have to strip his power away before he hits upload. How? Audrey asked. I can't go to the press. I'm a fugitive. We don't go to the press, Nathaniel said. We go to the one group of people Preston fears more than the FBI. The cartel. The shareholders, Nathaniel said. He pulled up a list of emails. Every major investor in Sterling Capital is currently in a panic because of the liquidity freeze. They are desperate for answers. If we send them an anonymous tip explaining why the system crashed, that it was a safety protocol because the CEO was compromised, they will turn on him. They won't believe an anonymous email, Audrey said. They will if it comes with receipts, Nathaniel said. Do we have the credit card logs from the Chicago trip? Yes, Audrey said. I saved everything before the fire. Okay, Nathaniel said. We draft a statement. We tell them that Preston Sterling is being blackmailed by a third party regarding illicit activities on August 14th, 2022. We attach the hotel receipt from Chicago. And we attach the screenshot he just sent you. Send the screenshot? Audrey recoiled. But that exposes me. No, Nathaniel said. We blur you out. We crop it. We frame it as him being the one compromised. We tell the shareholders. The CEO is reckless. He records his private life. He leaves himself open to extortion. Is this the man you trust with your billions? Audrey understood. It was genius. They were taking his weapon, shame, and turning it into a question of competence. He's not a predator, Audrey whispered. He's a liability. Exactly, Nathaniel said. Wall Street forgives moral failings. They do not forgive risk. Audrey sat back at the laptop. She opened a secure, untraceable email client. Subject, Urgent Security Risk Assessment, Sterling Capital, she typed. She attached the files. She attached the blurred screenshot. This is it, she said. If we send this, we declare total war. There is no going back. He will burn everything to find us. He's already burning everything, Audrey, Nathaniel said softly. Look at the smoke. Audrey thought of the fire in the penthouse. She thought of the soft woman who used to live there. She hit send all. Sent to Board of Directors, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, SEC tip line. Across the ocean, in a five-star hotel suite in Zurich, Preston Sterling's phone began to buzz. And then it buzzed again. And again. A cacophony of notifications. In the bunker, Audrey watched the timer run out. 0 minutes. She waited for the leak. She waited for her face to appear on TMZ. It didn't happen. Instead, a new news alert flashed on the screen. Sterling Capital shares plummet another 15% in after-hours trading amidst rumors of CEO compromise. Board calls emergency meeting. He didn't release it, Nathaniel said, letting out a long breath. He was too busy answering calls from his angry investors. Audrey slumped back in her chair. They had won the battle. But then, the lights in the bunker flickered. The hum of the servers died down. Power surge? Audrey asked. No, Nathaniel said, pulling his gun instantly. He looked at the electronic lock on the bunker door. The keypad was dead. They cut the power line, Nathaniel whispered. They found us. Heavy footsteps echoed on the metal stairs above. Preston hadn't released the video. He had used the email traffic to triangulate their position. The anonymous email hadn't been anonymous enough. Get to the back, Nathaniel hissed, pushing Audrey toward the emergency hatch. Go. Boom. The door to the repair shop upstairs was kicked in. Clear the room, a voice shouted. Secure the target. Audrey scrambled into the dark crawl space, clutching her laptop. She looked back just in time to see Nathaniel take a defensive position behind the server rack. She wasn't a fugitive anymore. She was the prey. The darkness in the bunker was total, save for the strobing beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the dust above. Audrey squeezed her body into the narrow ventilation crawl space behind the server rack. The metal was cold against her cheek. She held her breath, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the men upstairs could hear it. Flashbang, a voice shouted. Bang! A blinding white light exploded in the main room, followed by a deafening ringing sound. Even inside the vent, Audrey clamped her hands over her ears. Then came the gunfire. It wasn't the cinematic bang-bang of movies. It was suppressed, sharp thwip-thwip sounds of high-caliber rounds hitting the metal servers. Suppressing fire. Nathaniel's voice roared. He fired back, 2 controlled shots. Audrey peeked through the grate. She saw Nathaniel overturning a heavy steel desk for cover. He wasn't running. He was drawing their fire away from the back wall. Away from her. Audrey, go, he yelled, reloading his magazine. Take the tunnel. Go to the dead drop. I can't leave you, she screamed back, her voice lost in the chaos. If they get both of us, we lose, Nathaniel shouted. A bullet sparked off the server next to his head. Run, Audrey. Be the ghost. 2 mercenaries dropped down the stairs, moving in a pincer formation. They were professional, efficient. They had Nathaniel pinned. One of them tossed a canister. Tear gas. White smoke filled the room instantly. Audrey coughed, her eyes stinging. Through the haze, she saw a shadow lunge at Nathaniel. There was a struggle, the sound of breaking bones, a grunt of pain, and then silence. Target secured. A distorted voice said over a radio. Male. Caucasian. Unconscious. What about the female? Another voice asked. Scanning heat signatures. Audrey froze. Thermal optics. They would see her body heat glowing in the vent. She looked down the dark tunnel behind her. It was an old cable run that led to the sewer main. It was tight, filthy, and terrified her. But staying here meant death. She heard heavy boots walking toward the server rack. Heat signature detected behind the north wall, the mercenary said. Drill it. Audrey scrambled backward. She shoved her laptop bag in front of her and crawled. She crawled over dead rats, over sharp, rusted bolts, dragging herself through the slime of the city's underbelly. Behind her, she heard the screech of a saw cutting through the vent grate. She's in the walls. Audrey didn't look back. She pushed herself faster, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the grime. She crawled until her knees bled. She crawled until the air smelled less like ozone and more like rot. She fell out of the vent into a larger concrete tunnel, the storm drain. The water was icy, rushing around her ankles. She stood up, gasping for air. She was alive, but she was alone. Above her, through a grate in the street, she saw the flashing lights of police cars arriving too late. She heard the mercenaries dragging Nathaniel out the back exit. They had taken him. The only person who believed in her. The only person who knew how to fight. Audrey stood in the dark water, clutching her laptop. She was shivering violently, not from the cold, but from the realization that the safety net was gone. She wasn't the architect right now. She was just a woman in a sewer, hunted by a billionaire who wanted her head on a spike. 3 a.m. The subway station in Queens was deserted, smelling of stale urine and bleach. Audrey sat on a wooden bench at the far end of the platform, huddled in her oversized coat. She looked like just another homeless soul seeking shelter from the wind. Her face was smudged with dirt. Her hair was a tangled mess. No one looked at her twice. She was invisible. Finally, she opened the laptop. The battery was at 14%. She needed to know where they had taken Nathaniel, but she couldn't log into the network. If she went online, they would trace the IP address to the station Wi-Fi. Think, she whispered to herself, rocking back and forth. What did he say? Go to the dead drop. Nathaniel was paranoid. He was brilliant. He wouldn't have left her without a contingency plan. She searched her memory. A week ago, when they were first setting up the bunker, he had mentioned a storage unit for old hardware. He said it was in his mother's name, Martha Vance. Audrey didn't have internet to search for it. She had to use old-school methods. She walked over to the recycling bin near the turnstiles. She dug through the trash until she found a discarded newspaper, the New York Post. She flipped to the back, past the sports, to the classifieds. Nathaniel was old-fashioned. He trusted paper trails more than digital ones. There, in the storage auctions section, was a small, circled ad. It wasn't circled by pen. It was printed that way, a subtle code. For sale, vintage electronics. Unit 404. Long Island City Self-Storage. Unit 404. Error, not found. It was a coder's joke. Long Island City, Audrey whispered. It was a 5-mile walk. She started walking. She walked through the sleeping city, sticking to the shadows. Every passing police cruiser made her heart stop. She kept her head down, limping slightly on her bruised knee. When she arrived at the storage facility, the sun was just beginning to bleach the sky gray. The gate was locked with a keypad. She didn't know the code. She looked at the keypad. The numbers 1, 9, 8, and 4 were worn down more than the others. 1984, Orwell. Another one of Nathaniel's favorites. She typed it in. 1-9-8-4. Buzz. The gate clicked open. She found Unit 404 down a long, fluorescent-lit corridor. The padlock was a heavy-duty biometric scanner. It didn't take a key. It took a fingerprint. Audrey sank to the floor, defeated. She didn't have Nathaniel's finger. God, why? She sobbed, hitting the metal door. Why give me a door I can't open? But then she remembered. The coffee shop. When they first met, Nathaniel had handed her a file. He had touched the paper. She still had that file in her laptop bag. It was a long shot. It was something out of a spy movie. But she was desperate. She pulled out the file folder. There was a smudge of oil on the corner where his thumb had rested. She pulled a roll of clear packing tape from a discard pile in the hallway. She carefully pressed the tape over the smudge, lifting the latent print. She held the tape up to the scanner. Please, she begged the universe. Just one win. Give me one win. The scanner beamed a red light onto the tape. It hesitated. Beep. Green light. The lock popped open. Audrey rolled up the metal door. Inside, there were no electronics. There was a cot, a shelf of canned food, a duffel bag, and a wall covered in photos of Preston Sterling. This wasn't just storage. This was Nathaniel's war room. She unzipped the duffel bag. Inside were stacks of cash, real cash, non-sequential bills, a dozen burner phones, and a passport. She opened the passport. It had her photo on it. But the name wasn't Audrey Sterling. The name was Victoria Vane. A note fell out of the passport, in Nathaniel's handwriting. If you are reading this, I'm compromised. Don't come for me yet. I can handle interrogation. You need to handle the business. Preston's weakness isn't the money. It's the sister. She's back in New York. Check the Ritz. N. Audrey clutched the note to her chest. He had prepared for this. He had given her a new identity and a new mission. She wasn't Audrey anymore. Audrey was hunted. She stood up, wiping the dirt from her face. She looked at the cash. She looked at the passport. Victoria Vane, she tested the name. It sounded sharp. Dangerous. She grabbed the bag. I'm coming for you, Jessica, she whispered. The Ritz-Carlton Central Park. A fortress of old money and limestone. Audrey, now Victoria, walked through the revolving doors. She had used the cash from the safe house to buy a severe black wig, oversized sunglasses, and a tailored red power suit from a consignment shop. She looked nothing like the soft wife in the gray sweater. She looked like a shark. She walked straight to the concierge desk. "I'm here for the Sterling party," she said, her voice bored and imperious. "I'm the new PR crisis consultant sent from Zurich. Jessica is expecting me." The concierge hesitated. "I wasn't notified of any visitors, MS." "Vain," Audrey said. "And if you call Jessica to verify, you'll be interrupting her breastfeeding. Do you want to be the one to tell Preston Sterling that his crisis team was delayed in the lobby because you wanted to make a phone call?" The name, Preston Sterling, worked like magic. Fear flickered in the young man's eyes. "Of course not, Ms. Vane. Penthouse B. Key card is programmed for the elevator." He handed her the card. Audrey took it without a smile. She walked to the elevators, her heart thumping a slow, steady rhythm. It was a bluff. A massive, terrifying bluff. If Jessica was actually in the room, Audrey would be recognized instantly. But Audrey was betting on Jessica's habits. It was 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. Jessica never missed her hot yoga class. She would be at the Equinox downstairs, leaving the baby with a nanny. The elevator opened into Penthouse B. It was opulent. Flowers everywhere. And chaos. Open suitcases, clothes strewn across the velvet sofas. It smelled of baby powder and expensive perfume. "Hello," Audrey called out. Silence. The nanny must be out for a walk with the baby. The suite was empty. Audrey moved fast. She didn't touch the clothes. She went straight to the desk, where Jessica's laptop sat open. It was password protected. Audrey smirked. Jessica used the same password for everything. Preston Forever 1. She typed it in. Access granted. "Too easy," Audrey muttered. She inserted a USB drive she had preloaded with a keylogger, a program that would record every keystroke Jessica made from now on. Every password, every email, every text message sent from this computer would be mirrored to Audrey's burner phone. But as she waited for the upload, a folder on the desktop caught her eye. Folder name, Insurance. Curiosity got the better of her. She clicked it. It wasn't photos of the baby. It wasn't love letters. It was audio files. Dozens of them. Audrey clicked one dated 2 days ago. Preston's voice. "Listen to me, you idiot. The Chinese deal is dead. We need a new buyer for the code. I'm meeting with the Russians in Brooklyn on Friday. They don't care about the copyrights." Jessica's voice. "But Preston, that's treason. Selling encryption tech to them. If the feds find out." "Preston, the feds won't find out because you're going to be the mule. You're going to carry the drive. If they catch anyone, they catch you. Now shut up and pack." Audrey froze. Jessica wasn't just a mistress. She was a patsy. Preston was setting her up to take the fall for selling state secrets. And Jessica was recording him because she knew it. She doesn't trust him, Audrey realized. The cracks are already there. She copied the folder to her drive. This wasn't just leverage against Preston. This was the wedge she needed to drive between them. Suddenly, the front door clicked. "I'm telling you," the yoga instructor was staring at me. Jessica's voice floated in from the hallway. Audrey pulled the USB drive. She had nowhere to hide. The suite was open concept. She looked at the balcony door. It was a sheer drop to the street, but it connected to the neighbor's terrace. She bolted for the glass doors, sliding them open just as Jessica walked into the living room. "Hello," Jessica called out, dropping her yoga mat. "Is someone here?" Audrey crouched behind a planter on the balcony, the wind whipping her wig. She watched through the glass as Jessica walked to the desk. Jessica frowned, looking at her laptop. She reached out and touched the mouse. The screen was still warm. "Preston," Jessica whispered, looking around fearfully. Audrey held her breath. If Jessica looked out the window, it was over. But Jessica didn't look outside. She looked at her phone. She dialed a number. "He's here," Jessica whispered into the phone. "I think he found the recordings." Audrey frowned. Who was Jessica calling? It wasn't Preston. She was calling someone else. "I need to move the insurance," Jessica said. "Tonight. Meet me at the docks." Audrey smiled in the cold wind. Jessica had a secret partner. The plot had just thickened. And Audrey, Victoria Vane, was going to crash the meeting. The wind off the East River tasted of salt and diesel fumes. Audrey sat in the driver's seat of a stolen Toyota Camry, an unlocked car she had hotwired using a technique Nathaniel had taught her in theory, but she had never tested until tonight. Her hands were still trembling, not from the cold, but from the line she had just crossed. Grand Theft Auto. The old Audrey would have fainted. The new Audrey just checked the gas gauge. She was parked in the shadows of a shipping container at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. 50 yards away, Jessica's Uber, a sleek black SUV, sat idling under a flickering street lamp. Jessica stepped out. She was clutching a designer handbag to her chest like a shield. She looked out of place in the industrial wasteland, a beacon of expensive cashmere in a world of rust and concrete. "Who are you meeting, Jess?" Audrey whispered, watching through a pair of binoculars she had found in Nathaniel's bag. A moment later, a gray van pulled up. No headlights. No license plates. The side door slid open. A man stepped out. He was massive, bald, wearing a leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too small for his shoulders. He didn't look like a corporate lawyer. He looked like a tombstone with legs. The Russian, Audrey realized. Preston had mentioned selling the code to the Russians. But Jessica was here alone. She was trying to cut Preston out of the deal. She was trying to sell the insurance, drive directly to the buyers. Audrey cracked the window to hear, but the wind was too strong. She had to rely on the visuals. Jessica was talking fast, using her hands. She held up a flash drive. The Russian reached for it. Jessica pulled it back. She pointed to the van. She wanted the money first. The Russian laughed. It was a cruel, mechanical sound that carried over the wind. He stepped closer to Jessica, invading her space. He reached out and touched her hair, then trailed his hand down to her neck. Jessica froze. She looked terrified. The Russian said something low. He didn't produce a briefcase of money. Instead, he produced a knife. Audrey's breath hitched. He's going to kill her. He was going to take the drive and dump her body in the river. Audrey grabbed the door handle. She hated Jessica. She hated her for the betrayal, for the baby, for the lies. But she couldn't watch her sister be butchered in a parking lot. She reached for the ignition. She would ram the van, create a distraction. But before she could turn the key, the Russian stopped. He pulled a phone from his pocket and showed the screen to Jessica. Jessica's face went pale in the street lamp light. She nodded frantically. She handed over the drive. The Russian took it, patted her cheek patronizingly, and got back in the van. He didn't pay her. He didn't kill her. He just took it. The van sped off. Jessica collapsed against the side of the shipping container, sliding down until she was sitting on the dirty asphalt, sobbing into her hands. Audrey let go of the ignition key. "Blackmail," Audrey whispered. "They have something on her, too." Preston wasn't the only one playing dirty. The buyers were holding all the cards. And now, the Russian mob had the evidence of Preston's treason. The stakes had just gone nuclear. Audrey didn't approach Jessica. She waited until her sister got back into the Uber and drove away. Then, Audrey followed. She didn't follow her back to the Ritz. The Uber headed deeper into Brooklyn, toward a gentrified neighborhood of brownstones. It pulled up to a nondescript apartment building. Jessica buzzed a unit. She didn't have a key. Audrey parked down the street and watched. 10 minutes later, a light went on in a third-floor window. Audrey opened her burner laptop. She still had the keylogger active on Jessica's computer, but Jessica wasn't using her laptop right now. She was using her phone. "I need to hear what she's saying," Audrey muttered. She opened a program Nathaniel had labeled Ghost_Protocol. It was a remote microphone activation tool, but it required the target device to be on an open Wi-Fi network. Audrey scanned the local networks. Brownstone_guest. Unsecured. Gotcha. She injected the code. A moment later, audio began to stream through her headphones. It was crackly, but audible. "He took it, Preston. He just took it." Jessica's voice was hysterical. Audrey stiffened. She was calling Preston. "I told you not to go alone." Preston's voice roared through the speaker. "You stupid girl. That drive was our safety net. If the Russians have it, they don't need to pay us. They can just blackmail us for the rest of our lives." He showed me a picture of the baby. Jessica screamed back. "He knew where my son was, Preston. He said if I didn't give him the drive, he'd pay a visit to the nanny. What was I supposed to do?" Silence on the line. Then, Preston's voice, cold and deadly. "You were supposed to be smart. But you're useless. You're a liability, Jessica." "Don't say that," Jessica pleaded. "I can fix it. I can get more files from the server." Audrey's laptop. She left it at the penthouse before the fire. "I saw the police log it into evidence. Maybe we can get it." Audrey's eyes widened. Her old laptop. The one she had abandoned when she ran to the airfield. It had the source code. It had everything, and it was sitting in an NYPD evidence locker. The police station? Preston scoffed. How do you propose we get into a police station? I have a friend, Jessica said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Detective Miller. We dated. Before you. He owes me a favor. Call him, Preston ordered. Get that laptop. If you give me the source code, I can rebuild the algorithm and sell it to the Chinese before the Russians decode the drive you lost. Do not fail me again, Jessica, or the Russians won't be the ones you have to worry about. The line went dead. Audrey took off the headphones. Her hands were shaking. There were 3 players in the game now. The Russians, they had the insurance, evidence of treason. Preston, he was trying to get the source code to sell to China. Jessica, she was the pivot point, going to a corrupt cop to steal Audrey's old laptop. If Preston gets that laptop, he wins, Audrey said. He rebuilds the system, sells it, and disappears with billions. She looked up at the lighted window. I have to get to that police station first, she decided. I have to steal my own laptop from the NYPD. It was insanity. It was impossible. But then she remembered Nathaniel's words. Ghosts can walk through walls. She put the car in gear. She wasn't going to the police station. She was going to find Detective Miller. Audrey spent the next 6 hours doing intel. She used Nathaniel's database to look up Detective Ryan Miller. NYPD, 84th Precinct. Divorced. Gambling debts. A stain on his record for mishandling evidence 3 years ago. He was dirty. And he was Jessica's ex. He's the weak link, Audrey whispered. She parked across the street from a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, known to be a cop hangout. According to his credit card history, which she had hacked into with frightening ease, Miller spent every Wednesday night here. At 11:30 p.m., a man stumbled out. He matched the file photo. Disheveled, mid-40s, carrying the weight of bad decisions on his shoulders. He walked toward a beat-up Ford Explorer. Audrey took a breath. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The black wig, the red lipstick, the sunglasses. She looked like trouble. She stepped out of her car and walked briskly, timing her interception perfectly. As Miller fumbled with his keys, she bumped into him hard. Whoa, watch it, Miller grunted, steadying himself. I'm so sorry, Audrey said, putting on a breathy, panicked voice. I think I'm being followed. Can you help me? Miller blinked, his cop instincts warring with the alcohol. He looked her up and down. He saw a beautiful woman in distress. Followed. By who? My ex, Audrey said. He's crazy. Please, just pretend you know me for a second. She leaned in close, grabbing his arm. She smelled the whiskey on his breath. It's okay, Miller said, puffing out his chest. I'm a police officer. You're safe. Thank God, she whispered. She slipped her hand into his jacket pocket. You're a lifesaver. She wasn't looking for a gun. She was looking for his phone. Why don't you let me walk you to your car? Miller offered, a lecherous smile creeping onto his face. That would be wonderful, Audrey said. It's just around the corner. She led him into the alleyway next to the bar. It was dark. Perfect. So, Miller said, stepping closer. What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? Looking for you, Ryan. She dropped the act instantly. Her voice shifted from scared victim to cold architect. Miller froze. How do you know my name? Audrey pulled a taser from her purse, another gift from Nathaniel's bag. Jessica sends her regards, she lied. ZZZ crack. She drove the taser into his neck. Miller convulsed and dropped like a sack of potatoes. Audrey didn't waste time. She grabbed his phone from his pocket. She hadn't managed to lift it earlier. She grabbed his badge, and she grabbed his keys. She dragged him behind a dumpster and zip-tied his hands and feet. Sleep tight, officer, she whispered. She unlocked his phone using his thumbprint before he woke up. She scrolled through his texts. There it was. A text from Jess, sent 2 hours ago. Jess, I need the laptop from case number 8992. Sterling evidence. Tonight. $50,000. Miller, it's in the secure locker. I need time. Jess, no time. Tonight. Meet me at the precinct back lot at 2 a.m. Audrey checked her watch. It was 1 a.m. She had the badge. She had the text confirmation. I'm going to take that meeting, Audrey said. But Jessica isn't going to get a laptop. She's going to get a surprise. She stood up, smoothing her red suit. She looked at the unconscious detective. Sorry, Ryan, she said, but I need your car. She climbed into the Ford Explorer. It smelled of stale donuts and corruption. She was going into the lion's den. The NYPD precinct. If she got caught, it was life in prison. But without that laptop, Preston sold the world to the highest bidder. Audrey started the engine. The architect was going to work. The back lot of the 84th precinct was a graveyard of squad cars and unmarked sedans. Audrey pulled Detective Miller's Ford Explorer into a reserved spot marked D.T.R. Miller. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She adjusted the rearview mirror to check her disguise one last time. The black wig. The dark sunglasses at 2 a.m., suspicious but necessary. She had Miller's badge clipped to her belt. "Walk like you own the place," she whispered. "Walk like Preston." She stepped out into the cold night air. She approached the rear employee entrance. There was a keypad and a card scanner. She held her breath and swiped Miller's badge. Beep. The light turned green. The lock clicked. Audrey exhaled. Step 1 complete. She slipped inside. The hallway smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was the graveyard shift, so the precinct was quiet, but not empty. She could hear phones ringing in the distance and the low murmur of voices from the bullpen. She kept her head down, walking briskly toward the evidence room. She knew the layout because she had hacked the building schematics 10 minutes ago in the car. "Hey, Miller." A voice called out from an open office door. Audrey froze. She didn't turn around. She waved a hand dismissively over her shoulder and kept walking, pitching her voice low and grunting. "Busy. Later. All right. All right. Don't bite my head off," the officer muttered, returning to his paperwork. Audrey turned the corner and slumped against the wall for a second. That was too close. She reached the evidence room door. It was a heavy steel cage. Inside, a bored sergeant sat behind a wire mesh window, watching a football game on a tiny TV. This was the hard part. Audrey approached the window. She kept her head angled down, letting the wig cover her face. She slid a requisition form under the glass, a form she had forged on Miller's laptop in the car. "Pick up for Detective Miller," she said, trying to make her voice sound bored and administrative. "Case number 8992. The Sterling laptop. DA needs it for a rush warrant." The sergeant didn't look up from the game. "Badge." Audrey slid Miller's badge under the glass. The sergeant glanced at it, then at the form. He frowned. "Miller usually comes down himself. He's in the John puking up bad sushi," Audrey improvised. "Told me to run it down so he doesn't miss the DA's deadline." The sergeant snorted. Classic Miller. He stood up, grabbed a set of keys, and walked into the cage rows. Audrey watched him disappear into the aisles of cardboard boxes and plastic bags. Seconds ticked by. Sweat beaded on her forehead under the wig. The sergeant returned carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside was a sleek, silver MacBook Pro. Her MacBook. The one with the sticker of a binary code tree on the lid. "Sign here," the sergeant said, sliding a clipboard and the bag through the slot. Audrey scribbled an illegible signature. She grabbed the bag. "Thanks," she mumbled. She turned and walked away. She didn't run. She forced herself to maintain a steady, bored pace until she pushed through the rear exit door and the cool night air hit her face. She had it. The Holy Grail. But as she reached Miller's car, headlights blinded her. A black SUV had pulled into the alleyway, blocking the exit. Audrey froze. It wasn't the police. The window of the SUV rolled down. "You're late, Ryan," a female voice called out. It was Jessica. Audrey stood paralyzed in the glare of the headlights. She held the evidence bag behind her back. Jessica was sitting in the driver's seat of the black SUV. She couldn't see Audrey's face clearly through the windshield and the glare. She thought she was talking to Detective Miller. "Come on, Ryan," Jessica hissed, leaning out the window. "Preston is blowing up my phone. Do you have it?" Audrey made a decision. There was no way to sneak past the car. The alley was too narrow. She walked forward, stepping out of the shadows and into the beam of light. "I have it," Audrey said. Her voice wasn't deep. It was her own. Jessica gasped. She slammed on the brakes. "Audrey." Audrey reached up and pulled off the black wig. Her natural hair tumbled down. She took off the sunglasses. She stared at her sister with eyes that were cold and hard. "Hello, Jessica." Jessica's mouth opened and closed. She looked from Audrey to the precinct door, then back to Audrey. "How? Where's Ryan?" "Ryan is taking a nap in a dumpster in Hell's Kitchen," Audrey said calmly. She held up the evidence bag. "And I believe this belongs to me." Jessica's eyes locked onto the laptop. Panic flared in her face. She scrambled to open her car door and stumbled out. She was wearing designer heels and a trench coat, but she looked disheveled, frantic. "Give it to me, Audrey," Jessica pleaded, holding out her hand. "You don't understand. If I don't give that to Preston tonight, he's going to hurt me." "He's going to hurt you?" Audrey laughed bitterly. "He's been hurting me for years, Jess. And you helped him. You slept in my bed. You held my husband's hand while I was losing a child. I didn't know about the miscarriage." Jessica cried, tears streaming down her face. "He told me you were away at a spa. He told me you didn't love him anymore. And you believed him because you wanted the money," Audrey said. "You wanted the lifestyle. I wanted to be safe." Jessica screamed. "You don't know what it's like, Audrey. You've always been the genius, the strong one. I'm just the pretty one. That's all I have. And now I have a son, and Preston is threatening to take him away if I don't fix this mess." Audrey looked at her sister, really looked at her. She saw the fear. She saw the bruises on Jessica's wrist, faint, covered with makeup, but there. Preston wasn't just controlling Audrey. He was abusing Jessica too. "He's a monster, Jess," Audrey said softly. "If you give him this laptop, he wins. He sells the code, he gets the billions, and he disappears. Do you really think he's going to take you with him? You're the loose end." Jessica sobbed, shaking her head. "But he promised." "His promises are worth $50 on a debit card," Audrey snapped. "Wake up. He's using you as a mule for the Russians. If the feds catch you with that drive, you go to prison for treason. He stays clean." Jessica froze. "The Russians, how did you know?" "I know everything," Audrey said. "I'm the architect, remember?" She stepped closer to her sister. "Go home, Jessica. Take your son. Go to Aunt Marie's in Ohio. Disappear." "I can't," Jessica whispered. "He's watching me. He has a tracker on my car." Audrey looked at the black SUV. She pulled Miller's gun from her waistband. She had taken that too. Bang. She shot the front tire of Jessica's SUV. The rubber exploded. The car sagged. Jessica screamed, covering her ears. "Now you can't drive it," Audrey said calmly, holstering the gun. "Tell him you got carjacked. Tell him I ambushed you. Tell him whatever you want. But get out of the city." She turned and walked back to Miller's Ford Explorer. "Audrey," Jessica called out, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. Sissy, I'm so sorry." Audrey paused with her hand on the door handle. The nickname cut deep, but the wound was too infected to heal with just words. "Run, Jessica," Audrey said without looking back. "Before I change my mind." She got in the car and peeled out of the alley, leaving her sister standing in the ruin of their relationship. Audrey didn't stop driving until she reached a 24-hour truck stop in New Jersey. She parked in the back, between two massive 18-wheelers. She needed to see what was on the laptop. She climbed into the back seat and unsealed the evidence bag. She pulled out the MacBook. It was cold to the touch. She pressed the power button. The Apple logo glowed. "Enter password." She typed her old password. Fibonacci 1123. The desktop loaded. It was exactly as she had left it. Her coding environments, her garden photos, her life. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's see the damage." She opened the source code for the Sentinel. She wanted to copy it to a secure drive and then wipe the machine, destroying the only copy Preston could use. But as she scrolled through the kernel logs, the deepest level of the system history, she saw something strange. A user login. Admin_root. "I never created a root admin account," Audrey frowned. She checked the timestamp on the account creation. November 12, 2016. Audrey gasped. That was 3 months before she married Preston. That was back when they were just dating. Back when she was showing him her little hobby project. She clicked on the activity log for admin_root. The log showed daily uploads. Every time Audrey wrote a line of code, this hidden account copied it and sent it to an external server. He was spying on me, she realized, the horror washing over her. Before he even proposed. He didn't marry me for love. He married me to secure the IP rights. She kept scrolling. The log showed more. Microphone activation, on. Webcam activation, on. He had been watching her through her own laptop for 7 years. Every private moment. Every conversation with her sister. Every time she cried alone in the kitchen. He knew everything. He knew she was the genius. He knew she was lonely. He knew exactly which buttons to push to keep her soft and compliant because he had been studying her like a lab rat. It was never a marriage, Audrey whispered, tears of rage filling her eyes. It was a long con. But then, She saw the final entry in the log. Dated yesterday. Upload complete. Project Omega. Project Omega? Audrey hadn't written a Project Omega. She searched the file directory. Hidden deep in the system folder was a file she didn't recognize. She opened it. It wasn't trading code. It was a blueprint. A schematic for a digital weapon designed to crash not just stock markets, but power grids. Preston wasn't selling a trading bot to the Chinese. He was selling a cyber warfare weapon disguised as a trading bot. He's not just a thief, Audrey said, closing the laptop with a snap. He's a terrorist. This wasn't about money anymore. If Preston sold this code, he could shut down the eastern seaboard. He could kill thousands in hospitals when the power died. Audrey looked at the lucky key on the seat next to her. She looked at the laptop. She had the weapon, and she had the key. I have to burn him down, she said. Not just his bank account. His life. She grabbed her burner phone. She wasn't calling the police. They were too slow. She was calling the one person who could help her start a war. She dialed the number on the back of the business card Nathaniel had given her, the emergency contact. Hello. A voice answered. It wasn't Nathaniel. It was Riz, his driver. Riz, Audrey said. It's Victoria Vane. I need a meeting with the Russians. The restaurant in Brighton Beach smelled of dill, roasted lamb, and cigar smoke. It was 4 a.m., but inside Odessa Nights, the room was full of men in leather jackets speaking in hushed, guttural Russian. Audrey walked in. She was still wearing the red power suit, now stained with grime from the truck stop, but she held her head high. Riz walked a step behind her, looking like a silent mountain. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to the woman in red. I'm here to see Volkov, Audrey said to the bartender. The bartender didn't blink. Closed. Private party. Tell him Victoria Vane is here, Audrey said, placing the lucky key on the bar. And tell him I have the key to the $2 billion he lost in the harbor tonight. A door in the back opened. The massive bald man from the shipping container, the one who had threatened Jessica, stepped out. He looked at Audrey, then at the key. He smirked and nodded toward the back room. Audrey walked into the lion's den. Inside, an older man sat at a table covered in white linen. He was eating borscht with a silver spoon. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a grandfather. This was Volkov, the man who actually ran the money. You are the wife, Volkov said without looking up. The one on the news. The cyber terrorist. I'm the architect, Audrey corrected him, sitting down uninvited. And I'm the only reason you aren't going to be arrested for treason tomorrow. Volkov paused. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Treason is a strong word, Mrs. Sterling. Preston is selling you this Sentinel code, Audrey said, leaning forward. But he didn't tell you about Project Omega, did he? She opened her laptop, the one she had stolen from the police station, and spun it around. She brought up the schematics for the cyber warfare weapon. He's not selling you a trading bot, Audrey said. He's selling you a grid killer. A weapon designed to shut down U.S. infrastructure. And here is the kicker. He already sold the backdoor access to the Chinese Ministry of State Security 3 hours ago. Volkov's eyes narrowed. He sold it twice? He's playing you, Audrey said. He takes your money, gives you the drive, and the moment you plug it in, the Chinese backdoor activates. They get access to your servers. They drain your accounts. And when the FBI traces the weapon, they find your fingerprints, not Preston's. He sets you up as the fall guy for a cyber attack on American soil. Volkov stared at the screen. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He thinks we are fools, Volkov whispered. He thinks you are brute force, Audrey said. He thinks he can use you and discard you. I'm here to offer you a better deal. And what is that? I give you the clean code, Audrey said. No backdoors. No Chinese tracking software. You get the trading algorithm you paid for. You make your billions. And in exchange? In exchange, Audrey said, her voice dropping to ice. You give me his army. I need manpower. I need to extract a prisoner he's holding. And then, I need you to help me kill his deal. Volkov looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. He saw the desperation and the brilliance. He smiled, revealing a gold tooth. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, Volkov said. He poured 2 shots of vodka. He slid one to Audrey. To the architect, he said. Audrey took the shot. It burned going down, fueling the fire already raging in her stomach. To the end, she replied. The warehouse in the Bronx was quiet. Too quiet. This was where the mercenaries had taken Nathaniel. Riz had tracked the GPS on Nathaniel's watch. a failsafe Preston's men hadn't found because it was embedded in the clasp. Audrey sat in the back of a black van, watching the feed from a drone Riz had deployed. The warehouse was guarded by 4 men outside, heavily armed. Standard formation, Riz grunted, checking his weapon. They expect a police raid. They don't expect Spetsnaz. Behind their van, 3 heavy SUVs idled. Volkov had kept his word. He had sent his best cleaners. Remember, Audrey said into her radio, I need Nathaniel alive. And I need the server he's hooked up to. Preston is using him to verify the encryption keys. We go in hard, Riz said. 3 minutes. In and out. The attack began not with a bang, but with a blackout. Audrey executed a script on her laptop that looped the security cameras of the warehouse. For the guards inside, the screens showed an empty, peaceful street. Outside, the Russians moved in. Thwip, thwip. Silenced shots took out the exterior guards. Riz breached the front door with a battering ram. Audrey watched the drone feed as the team swept into the building. Gunfire erupted inside, loud, chaotic. She flinched with every shot, terrified that a stray bullet would find Nathaniel. Room clear, Riz shouted over the comms. Moving to holding cell. Audrey held her breath. Target located, Riz said. Then, a pause. A heavy, sick silence. Audrey, it's bad. Audrey didn't wait. She jumped out of the van and ran into the warehouse. She ignored the bodies of the mercenaries on the floor. She ran straight to the back office. Nathaniel was strapped to a metal chair. His face was a mask of bruises. One eye was swollen shut. His fingers. Audrey choked back a sob. His fingers were broken. They had tortured him for the passwords. Nathaniel, she cried, falling to her knees beside him. She fumbled with a knife to cut his restraints. Nathaniel groaned. His good eye fluttered open. He looked at her, dazed. Victoria, he whispered, using her alias. It's me, she wept. I'm here. We got you. Did you? Nathaniel coughed, blood trickling from his lip. Did you stop the sale? Not yet, Audrey said, supporting his weight as Riz lifted him up. But I have an army now. We're going to burn him down. Nathaniel gripped her arm with surprising strength. The Citadel, he rasped. He's not in Switzerland anymore. He came back. He's at the Citadel, top floor. The Citadel, Sterling Capital's headquarters in Manhattan. A fortress of glass and steel. He's launching Project Omega from the mainframe, Nathaniel wheezed. Tonight, when the market opens in Tokyo, he's going to crash the grid and short the energy stocks. He'll make $1 trillion while the country burns. Audrey went cold. It wasn't just a sale. It was an active attack. We have to get you to a hospital, Audrey said. No hospital, Nathaniel said, shaking his head. Take me to the van. I can still type with my left hand. We have to stop him, Audrey. Tonight is the endgame. Audrey looked at her mentor. Broken, beaten, but unbroken in spirit. She looked at Riz. Load him up. Get the medical kit. She walked out of the warehouse. The sun was beginning to rise over the city. A blood-red dawn. Preston was in his tower, thinking he had won. He thought he had crushed the rebellion. He didn't know that the architect was coming. And she wasn't bringing a lawsuit. She was bringing a war. The Sterling Capitol building, the Citadel, pierced the Manhattan skyline like a jagged shard of ice. 70 stories of black glass, guarded by a private security force that rivaled the Secret Service. In the penthouse office on the top floor, Preston Sterling stood looking out at the city he believed he owned. He wore a fresh suit, perfectly tailored. He held a glass of scotch, celebrating the sunrise. Status? He asked without turning around. Jessica sat at the massive mahogany conference table. She looked pale, exhausted. She was typing on a secure terminal. The uplink is ready, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Project Omega is primed. Connection to the Tokyo Exchange is stable. The Chinese buyers have transferred the first tranche of funds. $1 billion. Excellent, Preston smiled. He took a sip of scotch. And the architect? No sign of her, Jessica lied. She hadn't told him about the encounter in the alley. She hadn't told him about Audrey stealing the laptop. She was terrified that if he knew, he would kill her. The mercenaries reported the bunker was cleared. Nathaniel Vance is neutralized. Audrey is likely hiding in a gutter somewhere. Good, Preston said. Let her rot. By the time she crawls out, I'll be the richest man in history, and she'll be a footnote in a psychiatric journal. He walked over to the desk. He placed his hand on the biometric scanner to authorize the final sequence. Access granted. Welcome, Mr. Sterling. In 1 hour, Preston said, watching the countdown clock on the wall. We initiate the crash. The power grid in the Northeast will fail. The markets will panic. Energy stocks will plummet to zero. And our short positions will make us kings. It was the perfect crime. Blame it on a Russian cyber attack, take the profit, and walk away. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. Sir, the head of security said, his voice tense. We have a situation in the lobby. I told you, no interruptions, Preston snapped. It's not a visitor, sir. It's a delivery. A delivery? A van just pulled up. A news van. And a woman just walked into the lobby. She's demanding to see you. She says she has the encryption key for the hard drive you lost in the fire. Preston froze. Describe her. Brunette. Red suit. Looks like, well, sir, she looks like your wife. But what? She's carrying a detonator. Preston dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. Locked down the building. Preston screamed. Cut the elevators. It's her. But down in the lobby, Audrey wasn't waiting for an invitation. She stood in the center of the marble atrium. She wasn't holding a bomb detonator. She was holding a dead man's switch linked to her phone. She looked directly into the security camera. Hello, Preston, she said, her voice amplified by the silence of the room. I heard you're throwing a party. I thought I'd crash it. Behind her, the glass door shattered. Riz and the Russian team didn't use the front door. They drove the van through the front window. Smoke filled the lobby. Alarms blared. Audrey didn't flinch. She stepped over the broken glass. Going up, she whispered. She bypassed the elevator lockdown using the rootkit she had installed on the mainframe years ago. The doors to the executive lift slid open. She stepped inside. Just her. The Russian stayed in the lobby to hold the line against security. She was going to the top. To face him alone. The elevator began to rise. 70 floors to destiny. The elevator ride to the 70th floor was a silent, vertical coffin. Audrey watched the floor numbers tick upward on the digital display. 50, 60, 65. With every passing floor, the air pressure changed, popping her ears, reminding her just how high she was climbing. She was ascending into the clouds, to the place where Preston believed he was a god. She checked the phone in her hand. The Dead Man Switch app was open, a simple interface Riz had coded for her in the van. It wasn't connected to explosives. It was connected to the building's fire suppression system. If her thumb left the screen, the halon gas would trigger, flooding the penthouse and sucking out the oxygen. It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. Ding. The door slid open. The penthouse office was a masterpiece of intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a 360-degree view of the Manhattan skyline, currently bathed in the blood-red light of dawn. The furniture was minimal, severe, and expensive. Preston stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the sun. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his reflection in the glass. Jessica sat at the conference table, her face pale, clutching the baby carrier. When she saw Audrey step out of the elevator, she let out a small, strangled gasp. Audrey, Jessica whispered. You're alive. Disappointed? Audrey asked, her voice calm, echoing in the vast room. Preston turned slowly. He swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. He looked at Audrey, at the red suit, the wig, the dirt on her shoes, and the phone in her hand. Victoria Vane, Preston drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. I must admit, Audrey, I didn't think you had it in you. The hair is a bit much, but the entrance? Driving a van through my lobby? That was theatrical. I almost applauded. Turn it off, Preston, Audrey said, stepping into the room. She didn't look at the view. She looked at the server bank humming in the corner, a massive, liquid-cooled supercomputer protected by a glass casing. Project Omega. Shut it down. Preston laughed. He took a sip of scotch. Shut it down? Audrey, look at the time. The Tokyo markets open in 4 minutes. The algorithm is already locked in. The sequence is autonomous. He walked toward her, stopping just out of reach. You can't stop it, he said softly. And you know why? Because you wrote the core kernel. You made the Sentinel unbreakable. I just weaponized it. I wrote it to protect assets, Audrey said, her grip tightening on the phone. You're using it to destroy the grid. If you crash the Northeast power network, people will die. Hospitals. Traffic lights. Life support. Preston shrugged, the gesture terrifyingly casual. Collateral damage. The energy sector is bloated. It needs a correction. And when the dust settles, Sterling Capital will own the infrastructure. I'm not destroying the grid, Audrey. I'm privatizing it. He looked at Jessica. Tell her, Jess. Tell her what we're going to buy with the profits. Jessica looked down at her hands. She was trembling. We're buying an island. In the Maldives. Non-extradition. Audrey felt a wave of nausea. You're going to burn down New York so you can retire on a beach? That's your master plan. It's the American dream, Preston said. And you're just in time to watch the fireworks. Audrey took a step toward the server bank. Stay back, Preston barked. The charm vanished instantly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun, a sleek, silver pistol that matched his cufflinks. He pointed it at her chest. You won't shoot me, Audrey said, holding up her phone. My thumb is on the screen. If I let go, the halon gas triggers. We all suffocate before the elevator can get back down. Preston's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the ceiling vents. He calculated the risk. You're bluffing, he said. You don't have the guts to kill yourself. You're soft, remember? You're the girl who cries over stray cats. That girl died in a sewer last night, Audrey said coldly. Test me. Preston hesitated. For the first time, he looked unsure. The soft wife he knew was gone. The woman standing before him was something new. Something he had created. Jessica, Preston snapped, keeping the gun trained on Audrey. Go to the terminal. Override the fire suppression system manually. Jessica froze. She looked at Audrey, then at Preston. Do it, Preston roared. Jessica stood up slowly. She walked toward the wall panel. Jess, don't, Audrey said, her voice dropping to a plea. Look at him. He has a gun. He's willing to kill me. Do you really think he won't kill you once he has the money? You know too much. You're the loose end. Jessica's hand hovered over the panel. Tears streamed down her face. He promised. He said we're a family. He lied about the miscarriage, Jess, Audrey said. He lied about the business trip. He lied about the Russians. He used you as a mule. He doesn't love you. He loves what you do for him. Shut up, Preston shouted. He cocked the hammer of the gun. Input the override code, Jessica. Or so help me God, I will put a bullet in your sister's head right now. Jessica looked at Preston. She saw the madness in his eyes. The desperation. She looked at the baby carrier on the table. Her son was sleeping, oblivious to the fact that his father was a monster. Jessica's hand trembled. She punched in a code. Beep. System override accepted, the automated voice announced. Fire suppression disabled. Preston smiled, a wolfish, victorious grin. Good girl, he purred. He looked back at Audrey. See? Loyalty is purchased, Audrey. And you're bankrupt. He lowered the gun slightly, confident again. The halon thread is gone. Now, put the phone down and step away from my computer. Audrey looked at her phone. The bluff was burned. She was defenseless. But she didn't step back. She smiled. You're right, Preston, she said. I can't flood the room with gas anymore. She tapped a different icon on her phone screen. But I wasn't relying on the gas, she said. I was relying on the time. Time. Preston frowned. I kept you talking for 3 minutes, Audrey said. Which means the Russian team in the lobby had exactly enough time to cut the fiber optic cables to the building. Preston's face went pale. He spun around to look at the server. On the massive screen, the upload bar for Project Omega froze at 99%. Connection lost. Network unreachable. No, Preston whispered. He ran to the terminal. He smashed the keyboard. No. Reconnect. Reroute. It's a hard cut, Audrey said calmly. You're offline, Preston. You can't crash the grid from a glass box with no internet. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. The hum of the server had stopped. The only sound was Preston's ragged breathing. He stared at the screen. The billions of dollars, the island, the victory, it was all frozen on a loading bar that would never finish. Slowly, he turned around. His face was no longer handsome. It was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. You ruined it, he whispered. You ruined everything. I saved it, Audrey said. It's over, Preston. The police are downstairs. The Russians are blocking the exits. You have nowhere to go. Preston looked at the gun in his hand. Then he looked at the server, the physical machine containing the only copy of the weapon. If I can't sell it, he said, his voice trembling with a terrifying logic, then nobody gets it. He didn't point the gun at Audrey. He pointed it at the liquid cooling tank of the server. Preston, don't. Audrey screamed. If he shot the tank, the coolant would spill. The processors would overheat instantly. The data would be destroyed. It sounded like a victory, but Audrey knew the truth. If the drive was destroyed here, without a forensic copy, she would have no proof of his treason. He would claim this cyber attack destroyed the evidence. He would walk free, and she would still be the fugitive. She needed that drive intact to prove her innocence. Bang! Preston fired. The glass casing shattered. Blue coolant liquid gushed out onto the floor, hissing as it hit the hot electronics. Steam began to rise immediately. Burn! Preston screamed, firing again. Bang! Bang! Sparks flew. The machine began to groan, the metal warping under the sudden heat spike. Audrey lunged. She didn't think. She tackled Preston, slamming into his waist. They hit the floor hard, sliding in the puddle of slick, blue coolant. The gun skittered away across the marble. Get off me! Preston roared, striking her in the face. Audrey tasted blood. She clawed at his eyes, fighting with the feral desperation of a woman who had lost everything. Preston was stronger. He grabbed her by the throat, pinning her down. His hands squeezed, cutting off her air. You should have stayed in the kitchen, he spat, his spittle hitting her cheek. You soft, useless little. Crack. A heavy porcelain vase shattered over Preston's head. He grunted, his eyes rolling back in his head. His grip loosened. He slumped forward, unconscious, landing heavily on top of Audrey. Audrey gasped, shoving his dead weight off her chest. She coughed, sucking in greedy gulps of air. She looked up. Jessica was standing there, chest heaving. She was holding the handle of a broken Ming vase. Her hands were shaking violently. He called me useless, Jessica whispered. Audrey stared at her sister. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't see the mistress. She saw the little sister she used to protect. The drive, Audrey rasped, scrambling to her feet. We have to save the drive before it melts. She ran to the smoking server. The heat was intense. She wrapped her blazer around her hand and reached into the steam, searching for the central hard drive bay. It's too hot. Jessica cried. I have to get it. Audrey shouted. It's my freedom. She felt the handle of the drive sled. It seared her skin. She screamed but pulled. Snap. The drive slid out. It was smoking, dripping with blue fluid, but it was in one piece. Audrey fell back, clutching the hot metal to her chest like a baby. She had it. The proof. The weapon. The end of the war. But then, the elevator chimed. Audrey and Jessica spun around. The doors opened. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the Russians. It was a man in a dark suit, holding a briefcase. He looked calm, unbothered by the smoke and the unconscious billionaire on the floor. Ms. Sterling, the man said smoothly. I believe you have something that belongs to the People's Republic of China. Audrey's blood ran cold. Preston's buyers hadn't left. They had come to collect. The air in the penthouse smelled of ozone, burnt plastic, and expensive cologne. Audrey stood by the shattered server casing, her chest heaving. In her hand, wrapped in her ruined blazer, was the smoking hard drive, the most dangerous object in New York City. The man in the suit, the Chinese agent, stepped over the broken glass in the foyer. He moved with a liquid, predatory grace. He didn't look at the unconscious Preston Sterling on the floor. He didn't look at Jessica cowering in the corner with the baby. His eyes were locked on the drive. Hand it over, Ms. Sterling, the agent said, his voice calm, almost bored. That technology is proprietary property of my employers. You are merely holding a stolen good. Audrey took a step back. Her heel crunched on a shard of the Ming vase. Behind her was the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the sheer, 70-story drop to the street. If you take one more step, Audrey said, her voice shaking but loud, I drop it. She held the drive out over the abyss. The wind from the broken lobby downstairs was creating a draft, whistling through the elevator shaft. The agent stopped. He tilted his head. If you drop it, the data is destroyed. You lose your leverage. You lose your proof. And you lose your weapon, Audrey countered. I'd rather destroy it than let you have it. I know what Project Omega does. I wrote the colonel. The agent's eyes narrowed. He assessed her. He saw the soot on her face, the desperation in her stance. He saw a woman pushed to the edge. You are a mathematician, the agent said smoothly, taking a slow step forward. You calculate odds. The odds of you surviving this room without giving me that drive are 0. My team is securing the stairwell. The police are locked out in the lobby. There is no escape. I don't need to escape, Audrey whispered. I just need to burn it down. She loosened her grip on the blazer. The drive slipped an inch. The agent flinched. Wait. Suddenly, a groan came from the floor. Preston. He was waking up. His hand shot out, grabbing Jessica's ankle. Jessica screamed. You? Preston slurred, blood dripping from his forehead where the vase had connected. He tried to pull himself up, using Jessica as leverage. Give me the gun. The silver pistol was lying 5 feet away. The Chinese agent looked at the gun. Then he looked at the drive. He had to make a choice. Secure the asset or neutralize the threat. He dove for the gun. Run! Audrey screamed at Jessica. But before the agent could reach the weapon, the elevator doors pinged again. Bang! 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 3 shots rang out, deafening in the glass box. The Chinese agent jerked, hit in the shoulder and leg. He collapsed, sliding across the marble floor. Riz stood in the elevator doorway, a smoking assault rifle in his hand. Behind him were 2 of Volkov's men. They looked battered. The fight in the lobby had been brutal, but they were standing. Check-out time, Riz grunted. He swept the room. He saw Preston trying to crawl toward the gun. Riz didn't hesitate. He walked over and kicked Preston hard in the ribs. Preston howled and curled into a ball. That's for Nathaniel, Riz spat. He looked at Audrey. We have 3 minutes before the NYPD SWAT breaches the stairwell. The lobby is lost. We have to go. The elevator? Audrey asked, clutching the drive. Compromised, Riz said. They cut the power to the lift motors. We're stuck on the 70th floor. Audrey looked at the ceiling. The roof. Volkov sent a bird, Riz nodded. It's 2 minutes out. Move. The stairwell to the roof was narrow and cold. Audrey led the way, her legs burning with lactic acid. She held the hard drive against her chest like a second heart. Behind her, Jessica stumbled, clutching the baby carrier, sobbing with every step. Riz brought up the rear, his rifle trained on the door below. Keep moving, Riz shouted. Don't stop. They burst out onto the helipad. The wind hit them like a physical blow. We were 70 stories up. The city sprawled out beneath them, a grid of gray and steel. The sound of sirens wailed from the streets below, a chorus of chaos they had created. Audrey scanned the sky. Where is he? Inbound. Riz pointed to the east. A dark shape materialized out of the sun's glare. A black Sikorsky helicopter, unmarked. It banked hard, the rotors chopping the air with a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that vibrated in Audrey's chest. It wasn't a police chopper. It was Volkov's private transport. The helicopter hovered over the pad, struggling against the updraft from the skyscrapers. The side door slid open. A man leaned out, waving them forward. Go. Audrey grabbed Jessica's arm. Get in. Jessica hesitated. She looked at the open door, the drop, the spinning blades. She looked back at the stairwell door. He's going to come for us, Jessica whispered. He never stops. Then we make him stop, Audrey shouted over the roar of the engine. Get on the bird, Jess. For your son. Jessica nodded. She ducked her head and ran toward the chopper. The crew chief pulled her and the baby inside. Audrey followed. She handed the drive to the crew chief and hauled herself up. Riz was the last one. He was backing toward the chopper, covering the door. Suddenly, the stairwell door burst open. Preston stumbled out. He was bloody, disheveled, a broken king. He held the silver pistol in his shaking hand. He saw them. He saw Audrey in the helicopter door. He raised the gun. You're mine, he screamed, the wind tearing the words from his mouth. You belong to me. He fired. Ping. A bullet sparked off the helicopter's fuselage, inches from Audrey's head. Take off, Riz yelled, diving into the cabin. The pilot didn't wait. He yanked the collective. The helicopter lurched upward, banking sharply away from the building. Audrey looked down. Preston ran to the edge of the helipad. He fired again and again, until the gun clicked empty. He stood there, a tiny figure on top of his ivory tower, screaming at the sky as his wife, his son, and his billions flew away into the sun. Audrey watched him shrink until he was nothing but a speck. She sat back against the bulkhead. She looked at the hard drive in her lap. It was cooling now. The blue fluid had dried into a sticky resin. She looked at Jessica, who was rocking the crying baby. They were safe. They had the weapon. But as Audrey looked at the drive, she felt a cold knot in her stomach. Winning the war was one thing. Surviving the peace was another. The safe house wasn't a bunker this time. It was a private clinic in Brighton Beach, owned by the Russian mob. It smelled of antiseptic and cabbage soup. Audrey sat in the waiting room. She had scrubbed the soot from her face, but the red suit was ruined. She didn't care. The double doors opened. A doctor in surgical scrubs stepped out. "He is stable," the doctor said in a thick accent. "Severe concussion. 3 broken fingers. Rib fractures. But he is awake." Audrey let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a week. "Can I see him?" "5 minutes," the doctor said. Audrey walked into the room. Nathaniel was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. His face was a map of purple and yellow bruises. One eye was swollen shut, but the other eye, the sharp, intelligent blue one, tracked her as she entered. "You look terrible," Audrey said softly, standing by the bed. "You should see the other guy," Nathaniel wheezed, a crooked smile touching his split lip. "Please tell me you got it." Audrey reached into her bag. She pulled out the hard drive. It was battered, stained, and ugly, but it was intact. "The Holy Grail," Nathaniel whispered. "Is it encrypted?" "Preston's biometric lock," Audrey said. "But I wrote the back door 3 years ago. I just decrypted it in the lobby." She opened her laptop, the stolen one, and connected the drive. "What's on it?" Nathaniel asked, trying to sit up. Audrey clicked the file directory. Project Omega's source code, she listed. The transaction logs with the Chinese ministry. The backdoor access keys for the U.S. power grid. She paused. She clicked a folder labeled Leverage. Her eyes widened. "It's not just the weapon," she said. "It's his insurance policy." She scrolled through the files. Senator Miller, bribe ledger. Judge Holloway, blackmail photos. SEC director, offshore account numbers. He kept receipts, Nathaniel realized. He was blackmailing everyone. The politicians, the regulators, the judges. That's how he stayed untouchable. "This isn't just evidence of a cybercrime," Audrey said, looking at Nathaniel. "This is a list of every corrupt official in New York. If we release this, we take down half the government," Nathaniel finished. Audrey looked at Jessica, who was sleeping in a chair in the corner with the baby. "If we release this," Audrey said, "we aren't just fighting Preston anymore. We're fighting the system that protected him." Suddenly, the TV in the corner of the room flashed a breaking news alert. "Live. Preston Sterling addresses the nation." Audrey turned up the volume. Preston stood at a podium. He was cleaned up, bandaged, but wearing a fresh suit. He looked solemn, heroic. "My fellow Americans," Preston said, looking directly into the camera. "Today, Sterling Capital was the victim of a brutal terrorist attack. My wife, Audrey Sterling, along with a radical eco-terrorist group known as the Architects, stormed our headquarters. They stole proprietary technology vital to national security." He paused. "They have threatened to shut down the power grid unless a ransom is paid. I am working closely with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. We have labeled Audrey Sterling as enemy combatant number 1. Audrey stared at the screen. "He's doubling down," Nathaniel whispered. "He's framing you as the terrorist who is going to use the weapon, not the one who stole it to stop him." "Do not approach this woman," Preston continued. "She is armed, dangerous, and mentally unstable. We will find her, and we will bring her to justice." Audrey looked at the hard drive. She held the truth, but the lie was already halfway around the world. "He wants a villain?" Audrey said, closing the laptop. "Fine, I'll be the villain." She looked at Nathaniel. "We don't leak this to the press," she said. "The press is owned by the people on this list. We need to go bigger." "How big?" "We're going to use Project Omega," Audrey said. "We're not going to crash the grid. We're going to hijack every screen in Times Square. We're going to play the evidence live." 7:59 p.m. Times Square, the crossroads of the world, was a canyon of neon light and noise. Thousands of tourists packed the streets, their faces illuminated by the towering digital billboards selling sodas, movies, and fashion. It was the beating heart of American commerce, the very thing Preston Sterling worshipped. Parked in a side street, a nondescript utility van hummed quietly. Inside, Audrey sat in front of her laptop. The screen was glowing with the intricate, dangerous lines of code that made up Project Omega. She wasn't using the code to crash the power grid. She was using it to hijack the signal feed of the largest digital advertising network in the world. "Transmitter is synced," Riz said from the driver's seat. "We have a line of sight to the NASDAQ tower. Once you hit enter, we own every screen from 42nd to 47th Street." Audrey looked at her hands. They weren't shaking. For the first time in this entire nightmare, she felt completely, terrifyingly calm. She looked at Nathaniel, who was propped up in the passenger seat, bandaged but alert. "Are you ready?" Nathaniel asked. "He called me a terrorist," Audrey whispered. "He told the world I was the villain. It's time to show them who the real monster is." She looked at the clock. 8 p.m. Prime time. Audrey pressed enter. Executing Omega Protocol. Target. Broadcast override. Outside, the world blinked. Simultaneously, 40 massive digital billboards went black. The Coca-Cola sign died. The movie trailers vanished. The stock tickers stopped scrolling. A hush fell over the crowd in Times Square. People stopped walking. They looked up, confused by the sudden darkness. Then, the screens flickered back to life. But not with ads. They were filled with a single, grainy video feed. It was the recording from Jessica's insurance folder. Preston Sterling's face, magnified to 10 stories tall, looked down at the city. "I'm not destroying the grid," the giant Preston said, his voice booming from the public address speakers Audrey had hijacked. "I'm privatizing it. The energy sector is bloated. It needs a correction." The crowd gasped. Phones were raised to record. On the screen, the video cut to a document. The blueprints for the cyber weapon, stamped with the Chinese ministry seal. "And when the dust settles," Preston's voice continued, cruel and arrogant, "Sterling Capital will own the infrastructure. Collateral damage? Who cares? Hospitals, traffic lights, let them fail. I'm buying an island." The audio was crisp. The evidence was undeniable. It wasn't a deep fake. It was a confession. In his penthouse at the Ritz-Carlton, Preston Sterling was watching the news. He saw the live feed from Times Square. He saw his own face admitting to treason on the side of a skyscraper. He dropped his scotch glass. "No," he whispered, backing away from the TV. "No, no, no." He scrambled for his phone to call his lawyers, to call the president, to call anyone. But his phone didn't have a signal. And then he heard it. The sound of a battering ram hitting his hotel room door. Boom. "FBI. Open up." Preston didn't run. He didn't fight. He simply collapsed into a chair, watching the giant version of himself destroy his own life. The architect hadn't just beaten him. She had turned his own ego into the weapon that killed him. Back in the van, Audrey watched the feed. She saw the news crawlers change from "Hunt for Audrey Sterling" to "Preston Sterling Exposed." She closed her laptop. "It's done," she said. She looked at Jessica, who was sitting in the back, holding her sleeping son. Jessica was crying, but they were tears of relief. She was free. The leverage was gone. "Thank you," Jessica sobbed. "Sissy, thank you." Audrey reached back and squeezed her sister's hand. "Go to Ohio, Jess. Raise him well. Don't let him become his father." Audrey opened the van door and stepped out into the cool night air. She didn't stay to watch the news reports. She didn't wait for the applause. "Where are you going?" Nathaniel called out. Audrey turned back. She looked at the man who had saved her, the man who had taught her how to fight. "I have a new algorithm to write," she smiled. "And I think I'm going to need a partner. Vane and Vance has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Nathaniel grinned through his bruises. "I'll draw up the paperwork." Audrey walked away down the street, disappearing into the crowd. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was just free. And for the first time in 7 years, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of music. Thank you for listening to this Mr. James story. Family, look at me. This story wasn't just about code or money. It was about the moment you decide that you are no longer a participant in your own destruction. If you are in a situation right now where someone is making you feel small so they can feel big, leave. Walk away. Your value is not determined by their inability to see it. You are the architect of your own life. If this story touched your spirit, please like the video and share it with someone who needs strength. And remember to subscribe to join the family. We are proving them wrong, one subscriber at a time. I love you. Stay strong.